Hello, Endeavor here, and today we're having a debate. The debate is on liberalism and whether or not it's a destructive force for what has been a destructive force or a positive force for Western civilization. I have several guys here. I'll let them introduce themselves first. The supporters of liberalism, and I'll let you guys say why you support it as a belief system. You can go first, Benedict.
Sure. My name is Benedict XVII. I'm the president of USA Liberalists, and I've been involved with the Liberalists since late January. And I'll be taking the position in this debate that liberalism does not, in fact, destroy civilizations. And my definition of liberalism is simply the belief in a distinction between the political order and the moral order. The role of the political order is not to promote a single agent-relative form of flourishing, but to secure the moral territory for each person to seek their own self-actualization.
Okay. Would Brandon like to add his definition?
Okay, yeah. Hi, I'm Brendan. I'm one of the one of the admins for the Liberalists. I essentially define liberalism as simply the respect of the rights of the individual rather than the survival or propagation of the group.
Okay.
And so I just want to add, I don't think that there are many liberalist principles actually enact in society today. So the idea that civilizations are being destroyed by them seems to me rather ludicrous.
Okay, we'll get into that definitely. Zarathustra, would you like to add why you support liberalism?
Okay, Zarathustra Serpent. I'm a pop culture philosopher on YouTube. To me, liberalism is just the belief in a free society based on the ideas of enlightenment. And I think that has proven to be the best society by far. And that is why I support it.
All right. The reason I'm opposed to liberalism, and I consider I'm a reactionary, reacting against the modern world, is one question that's really been on my mind for several years, and it's really a theme of my channel, is what is a nation? What is a civilization? What makes Western civilization? And what we're often told is it's Western values. It's beliefs in freedom, in equality, tolerance, democracy, that this is Western values. But from my experience of the world and my study of history, I've come to a very different conclusion. I'm of the belief that a nation and a civilization is a people and their shared identity, a culture, and their heritage that they have together. And I feel that over the past 70 years, liberalism has been around for 200 years, but I feel, especially over the last 70, it's been the dominant political force, and it's a system that really seeks to remove undue restrictions upon people. And I feel it's acted as this deconstructive force that's essentially stripped away Western man's culture, his spirituality, his sense of identity. And I feel that in the present day and the coming decades, it's deconstructing the people themselves through demographic replacement. And I feel that societies need an order of structure that liberalism really seeks to remove in the name of liberalization. And I feel it allows for hostile forces to subvert it. And I think the end result will be the replacement and destruction of the civilizations that originally implemented liberalism. And if Cedarwood would like to start with an argument.
Yeah, my position is a little different. It's I'm taking the woke centrist position almost. My position is that liberalism presupposes a certain level of societal discourse and cohesion, and when that breaks down, liberal solutions go out the window. And that personal freedom as the highest good has been bad for much of the same reason as Endeavor said. It's been deconstructive. It's deconstructed any idea of any obligation to society or even a lot of ideas of just self-restraint. And also progressivism totally displaced liberalism in our society when liberalism was dominant. That is a failure liberals have to own. And they can't just say, well, that's not liberalism, therefore liberalism's not at fault. Yeah, it's not, but still, it was what came after liberalism. It is what replaced liberalism. So there must be something wrong with liberalism on its own to make it insufficient to hold off progressive attempts to subvert it. Again, sort of as Endeavor said. And Yeah, I think that's it for me.
Okay. I'll go first, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
The idea that a free society leads to basically disintegration and the rule of the mob is a very old idea, very old knowledge. Since the Greek philosophers, it has always been known that this is the danger of a democracy, basically, of the rule of the people, of a free society. And we are now, this is a wisdom that we are aware of, and the liberal society is trying to prevent it from happening this time around. Yes, there has been some. I agree. For instance, I have a video on my channel that perhaps you would like to watch. It's called Nationalism Reconsidered, where I speak of the need to go back to basically liberal forms of nationalism, which after the two world wars, we basically the idea of nationalism became kind of taboo, and whereas in the past nationalism was a liberal thing, in the beginning of the 19th century, for instance. And so I was suggesting that we go back to that. I am an Israeli. In Israel, we have the idea that we are a Jewish democratic state, which means that the identity of the state is national Jewish, whereas the individuals, the people, all have the same rights. We live in a democratic society, and I believe that this is the balance that needs to be that other Western countries should adopt as well. So I agree that, for instance, the liberalism has disintegrated because I don't believe that a society can exist without an ethos that binds all the people together, a national ethos. And so yes, liberalism does that. Those are the dangers of liberalism. But every system of thought has dangers, and that doesn't mean that that we need to throw the baby with the bathwater.
Okay, actually, may I respond to that, Endeavor? I just have a question. So I'm not sure if I understood the Zarathustra Serpent, but you'd basically be okay with Western countries adopting a very strict exclusionary and perhaps even ethnically based nationalism?
No, not ethnically based.
But that's what it is in Israel.
Well, I was going to ask, would you say it would be legitimate for a country like Canada to apply, or America to apply the same status that is applied to Jews in Israel to whites, or for the British to apply that status to the native Brits?
Whites are a race. Jews are not a race. Anyone can become a Jew.
Well, no. I mean, look at the way Ethiopian Jews are treated. Clearly, there's a racial element to it. But it's also not entirely relevant, because even if you want to say it's just a religion, you're still creating an exclusionary identity based on a trait people usually don't.
It's not a religion. It's a nationality. It's a national.
No. It's not a nationality, because most Jews are diaspora.
So they still believe that they belong to the Jewish nation.
Not
every Jew. Every Jew.
No, they don't all.
Even in the two. I'm a Jew. Don't tell me.
Jew. You're an Israeli Jew. I'm talking about diasporan Jews. Don't all believe.
But you do acknowledge, though, that the state of Israel is run explicitly to ensure that the protection of the Jewish nation. Correct?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what would stop us from applying that to whites? Within reason, obviously.
Again, that's right.
Okay, but what's wrong with race?
Because it excludes certain people.
So does Jewishness.
No. Yeah, anyone can become a Jew, and
it's actually pretty hard to convert, for one thing, and also most people do it. So
that's right. It's pretty hard, but it is possible.
So why is there this big gap between pretty hard and not possible?
Well, okay. Here's the thing.
An epistemological preference that seems kind of arbitrary.
No, because you don't have to convert to become a Jew. you don't have to convert to the religion. You can come and live in Israel and apply for, after a while, apply for an Israeli citizenship. And if you become an integral part of the Israeli society, then you are considered a Jew. Doesn't matter what religion, what ethnicity.
Can I ask though, if a bunch of if a large portion of Sunni Muslims from Saudi Arabia declared themselves Jews, entered the country, and then immediately began identifying with the Muslim group, would they still allow for that?
I don't think so. I don't think they will be allowed so fast into the country. They will
you said though everyone can be a Jew. So what's stopping a hostile force from?
You have to be accepted as a Jew, and this is what you do in every nation, right?
It's an exclusive identity, correct?
Wait. Let me ask. What does being accepted as a Jew mean? I'm a little confused by that.
Well, to become a Jew, you either need to be accepted by the religious establishment. That means you're a religious Jew, and then since religious Jew basically includes the idea that you are part of the Jewish nation, then you become part of the Jewish nation, and or you can become an Israeli citizen.
Yeah. Okay.
But our nations are giving people citizenship, and that's not really fixing things. So there's not really a distinction.
Well,
what we're doing now.
Okay. So to I guess just get off the topic of who's of arguing over like who's a Jew and who isn't. The scenario that I'd like to present is because this is really the scenario that we find ourselves in. I agree with Zarathustra that there needs to be this identity that's protected.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the scenario that I see that has happened to Western countries. If we applied the same to Israel, what I feel Western countries have done in the last 50 years is the equivalent to if Israel tomorrow declared that the Jews as no longer a Jewish state, the Jews have no special status. They'll end any pronatal Jewish policies. They'll all their media and academy will start vilifying them, and on top of that, they'll import 80,000 non-Jews every year into Israel, and because you would agree, Zarathustra, that would be a very bad situation for you and your family, right?
I think it is a bad situation for European. Look, ask any Israeli. Most of them will tell you, we think you are crazy in Europe, and that you are basically giving up on your nationality.
Exactly. I completely agree with that. But the thing is,
I think what we would ask is, what's the liberal solution to this situation? Because
in 1968, Pierre Elliott Trudeau pretty much decided that my people, the European Canadians, the British Canadians, that we have no particular claim to our land. Our identity has no special status, and that our country has no identity, no major identity, and that we will essentially that everyone in the world can be one of us. But these were all liberalization of Canadian society.
Well, it's not against liberal values to believe that. Look, liberal is for everyone living out their identity. Yes. So national identity is an identity. So you need to allow national identity to exist, to flourish, and you do that in a nation state. And within that nation state, you can also the identity of the state has to be according to in the image of the nation, and then you can have all the subcultures within it. You can have a pluralist society where everyone where there are many cultures, but every culture has to integrate within the and become part of the culture. Can't be against the national.
If I suggested that in my country, I'd probably lose my job, and there's a chance I could get charged with a hate speech.
Well, what I would add is it's all very well and good. I largely agree with Zarathustra Serpent on the broad strokes that there is no contradiction with liberalism and nationalism per se, but there's also no prescription in liberalism for nationalism. That's kind of what it comes down to, is a lot of liberals think that because they can work through a problem and it's consistent with liberalism, which is pretty easy to do because liberalism, frankly, just says a lot about very little. But they think that that means, therefore, there's no inherent issue with their ideology. But one problem with liberalism, or perhaps liberals themselves, is they score very highly in trait openness, which means they're very open to experience, open to the world. And so they are very likely to support things like globalism, mass immigration, etc. Yeah. And we even saw this on Twitter. This guy called Simon Schama, he's a big wig in the EU. He criticized Orban for turning his back on quote-unquote liberal democracy. Now, I'm using Simon Schama as an example of this because Simon Schama also debated Mark Stein and Nigel Farage on whether immigration was bad. Of course, he took the position that mass immigration was good, and even went so far as to say people who cite things like the Rotherham sex abuse scandal where Pakistani Muslims raped 1,400 English girls. He said people who cite that have a sexual fixation that they just need to get over. I mean, this is clearly a repugnant immigrationist man, but he sees himself as a liberal, and he's hardly alone. Our ruling elite sees itself as liberal, and it sees this mass immigration as an expression of liberalism. So that's what I mean when I say I don't think there's a liberal solution, because both have, as far as liberalism is concerned, equally valid claims, because liberalism neither affirms neither one, just doesn't really contradict either one.
All right. So a question I wanted to ask Brandon was, because you had said at the beginning that you believe liberalism supports the rights of the individual over the rights of the group, correct?
Yeah, certainly, yeah.
Well, I mean, the scenario that Zarathustra described in Israel, it certainly supports the group over the individual. Would you not say?
Again, I just remind you, it's a Jewish democratic state.
Well, it's by a degree. I mean, it's not like you must do what we say, but it's, there are limits to openness and franchise.
The limits are only how once you're an Israeli, there are no limits.
Yeah, but they guard that citizenship very well. I mean, Likud is like the Jewish BNP. Let's be honest.
So Brandon, would you be okay with a system like Israel?
What do you mean by a system like Israel, where you have to be a certain right ethnicity to get in?
Yeah, essentially.
To get in, but we won't kick out people who don't fit in. We're just going to say no more from this point on. Let's go with that.
Well, essentially, if it's voted in democratically, I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with it, because essentially all property in a country is essentially owned at any one point, and nobody has a right to just enter a new country. So I don't have a right to go to France or to Ethiopia and just take up land.
Okay, but what if they voted for something really stupid like no more border controls democratically? Would that be okay?
Let's say, for instance, if the UK, if the Labour Party got in and they got rid of the border control,
well, which they did already. So yeah,
I would be entirely against that. Yeah,
but it was democratic.
You see, that's the problem with democracy. You need some things that can't be democratically voted on. For instance, even if 99% of people vote in communism, they still don't have a right to take away my property, because it's intrinsic in my being.
Yeah, well,
that's property rights is a very existential philosophy.
Well, I doubt you'll disagree with this, but that's actually a very interesting issue with democracy, is that if you do just sort of flood the voter rolls with people who are likely to vote for you, which is something mass immigration does.
The Labour Party wants to do now by allowing 16-year-olds to vote.
Yeah, but
can I ask though, how are you gonna liberally stop? Because the Labour Party is using the liberal.
No, they're not liberal in it. No, they are not.
No, they're using the liberal system though.
Oh, okay. I'm so sorry. Yeah, sorry, I interrupted you. They are using a liberal system where everyone is, given universal suffrage, that anyone's vote is allowed to count.
Well, I mean, this, to my point, is that this is a very destructive thing, because they're using the liberal system to essentially destroy the, what, in my view, creates the essence of Britain itself. Would you not say?
So what creates the essence of Britain?
Well, the British people, first of all, their shared identity, their shared history, and the policies of the Labour Party is very strongly opposed to that. Would you not say?
Oh, definitely. For instance, when they had their Labour Youth, what was it? The Labour Youth Committee, they were charging people from black and ethnic minorities less money, which obviously is very illiberal, as I'm sure everyone else would agree. Since
yeah, I agree. Yeah, but I remember that. But how do you stop them from doing that? Though?
Happening in the birthplace of liberalism. That's what's so amazing.
Yeah. No, it is an interesting question because either you say that as liberals we have to let them discriminate on race, or we can say that by law you can't discriminate by race, which then is a question of freedom.
The point I'm trying to make though is, you've essentially let forces hostile to liberalism has allowed forces hostile to it to subvert it, and those forces are not going to grant you the same rights once they win. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, that's right. That's why it's best to create a system that so let me put it this way. When you're creating a system, you don't want to give power to the person in charge if you would not want that power used against you. So,
well, they're using it. They're democratically voting it upon it.
Well, to some extent,
that's a problem. In which case, the best solution would be essentially an upheaval of the system and starting a new one. Possibly.
Well, it'd be an upheaval of liberalism then, because that's the system that's bringing this about, wouldn't it?
Well, no, to bring about a liberal system that would not, which would not allow the infringement of rights.
Well, what would that mean? Because at some point, some government system's going to be illiberal and coercive. So I guess it's a matter of what we're okay with. So I'm just asking, what would kind of look like, just conceptually?
Well,
not asking you to know the tax policy.
Yeah. It's obviously, if you want me to have a perfect answer, that is a nirvana fallacy. So
yeah.
It would have to be democratic in essence because we need to have, some accountability. That's one of the problems with the EU. There's hardly any accountability. Sure, we get to elect the members of the European Parliament, but they don't represent our country. They join one of the, eight parties essentially, and the second largest is the bloody the Progressive Alliance of Socialists and Democrats.
Yeah.
So,
but the point I'm trying to make though is that liberalism. There's no liberal way of stopping the destruction that the Labour Party wants to bring about. Wouldn't you agree?
Why not?
In a system, no. I say the problem comes with education. If you because one of the major problems is, and one of the reasons I don't like religion, any religion, Christianity, Islam, is because it always targets children. Children are biologically mental sponges. They will take in whatever you tell them as truth because it's essential for them to listen to their elders in order to survive. Now, if you raise a child to think that because of the color of their skin, that people of another color have been oppressing them throughout history and will continue to oppress them, and that the only way out of this system is to vote in, for instance, the Labour Party that has John McDonnell, who is an outright Marxist, then it's going to be a major problem. So you need to start over education.
So I assume that you believe in things like freedom of religion, freedom of speech, all these things, correct?
Freedom of religion, but I'm entirely against the idea of raising children under any religion.
Okay, well, here's my question though: is how are you going to stop the Islamic communities that are already within Europe? How are you going to stop them liberally from forming these collectives, voting in?
So you cut out. Can you start that again?
Oh, sorry. How are you going to stop these Islamic communities, which are already very prevalent in Europe? How are you going to stop them using a liberal system from forming a collective, voting in their own interests, and eventually shaping European states to be more favorable to them and less favorable to others? And once they have enough power, just make it their system entirely and just scrap liberalism. How are you going to stop that?
Okay, well,
the
the first point would be treating them as if they were any other citizen. So none of this. Oh, we can't go after them because it's Islamic. It's Islamophobic. We can't criticize Islam because it's their holy books. Like, no, fuck off.
Well, okay.
Well, I mean, let me take this one. I kind of have two problems with that already. Like, one, a big reason they're not gone after is they're very reliable voting bloc, and in a democracy, that's like money talks in a democracy.
Yeah.
The other one is the societies which tend to have no problem telling minorities to get with the program tend to be kind of societies like mine, chauvinistic ones. So like you have China, they recently just made a bunch of imams dance in the streets because dancing is haram and they wanted to show them who's in charge. Yeah, that's kind of the societies that tend to get the job done on this one.
They actually put Muslims in camps now and force them to eat pork.
Yeah. Would you like to say something, Benedict? You haven't been speaking lately. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I'd actually like to return to an earlier point that I think Endeavor made, and that was that society needs a structure to maintain identity. And I agree that society does need a structure, but I don't think it's a political structure. It could be a social structure, a cultural structure that we need. At least in the USA, we don't really suffer from a political sickness, but from a moral sickness that manifests itself politically. So to say that the disintegration of society is the result of liberalism is like saying that a certain chess game is the result of the chess board. Liberalism merely seeks to give individuals the freedom to pursue the good. Liberalism is about getting the players to the board. If the good has not been pursued, that is not the fault of the board, but of the players.
Well,
Actually,
what I
can
would say is
can
that
clear it then?
man,
I wanna-
man
I
in
wanna-
nature does not.
We have a lot riding on these players, so it's a little easy to say.
All right, so I want to quickly jump on to
I think you guys are are painting a too dark picture, a picture that is too dark. You are basically looking, I think, at the future and thinking it's going to be bad. It's not that bad right now, and things can change.
Well,
I don't necessarily.
The idea of democracy is that it fixes itself, and if enough people see that things are going in a bad direction, they will change course. That's how democracies work.
Well, it's not so much that I think the future. I don't think it's not that I think the future is necessarily going to be bad, because I know our political elites aren't as committed to liberalism, and they'll just find a solution that suits them. And maybe it'll work out, maybe it won't. Maybe they'll just give like sex bots to all the immigrants, so it's just not a problem anymore. But that's kind of the thing, is I don't really see strictly speaking, I don't see a liberal solution. I don't think that's necessarily a problem. I don't think that means, oh, just get rid of liberalism. It's
what is a liberal?
I don't think it's a total view of society ultimately.
A liberal solution will be a solution that wants to maintain the free society. Look, in Israel, we have the concept of defensive democracy.
That's really broad, though. That's like,
because what is a free society?
You can say anything that sort of restores order is liberal, therefore, because it ultimately helped the free society. Yeah. What I mean is, liberals probably won't like the solutions that are taken, because they're going to be kind of coercive and maybe even thuggish.
You have
someone like with the world, yeah. So he's not. You have right wingers come up and do something stricter for a while, but that is still within a democracy. That is still within a liberal democracy. It's not
in theory.
So we don't like it as a liberal, but it is still a liberal. But it's still liberalism working.
Yeah, but the political and cultural forces are so opposed to that happening right now, though.
Yeah, I mean, like the wall still isn't made, so I mean, I wouldn't cast my
okay.
Just to go on, just to move past that. Right now, the right wing is currently promoting a hack fraud named Candace Owens because she's black. So I don't think they're the saviors of liberalism in the way.
No, of course they're going to be putting forward Candace Owens because they're trying to play the same game as the progressives. They're trying to say, look, we have a black person, therefore there is some weight to our argument. And it doesn't matter what the color of your skin is. The argument is what matters. I don't care if a communist is white. I don't care if a Muslim is white. They're following bad fucking ideas. And I don't agree that those ideas hold any weight whatsoever.
Well, I mean, that is true, but to people it does matter because people are these stupid, irrational creatures. But I mean, but what I would add is
point, though.
The problem with what the Republicans are doing is that they literally are playing the same game as the left, bringing up a non-white token to give moral support to their arguments, when the left will always beat them at the non-white gives me moral support because
they have more numbers. Exactly. Yeah.
What's the relationship between what you guys are discussing and the question we're trying to answer, whether liberalism destroys civilization?
Well, we're mostly we're arguing problems with liberalism that make the solutions you guys seem to like very difficult.
One thing I think is that a lot of the problems we're discussing have been brought about by the liberalization of society. Like, we talked. Like, for example, can I say something? It was what we talked about. We talked about things like Islam in Europe. That never needed to happen. There never needed to be a Islamic population in Europe. It's been The Europe of the 19th century never would have allowed this to happen.
I agree with you.
Well,
Yep.
then what caused the problem then?
The Schuman
I don't think the
Declaration of
issue was-
the 1950s. It was the document that was essentially signed that which allowed the European the European coal and steel community to form after World War II, which then became the EU. One of the founding principles of the European coal and steel community was to generate enough wealth so they could essentially fix Africa. Straight away from the 1950s, French politicians wanted Europe to have the white man's burden. The European Union was essentially established as this so it's a supranational, a supranational state that would force its citizens to pay to fix the world
What motivated them to have that mindset?
I would say all your nation states do that. They all do foreign aid and stuff.
Yeah, which I'm against, because it requires the citizenry to be taxed in order to pay for other people's problems, and I'm entirely against it.
Here's the thing: is that I believe that these globalist decisions, have been brought about by the lack of an exclusive identity to these civilizations, because you can talk all you want about the problems with identity politics and within the West, but the reason that they've allowed this to happen is because there wasn't the Canadian identity was destroyed, the American identity was destroyed, the British identity was destroyed, and this was through liberalization. It was seen as this was seen as a reactionary and a far right view back then. That's why they got rid of it following the Second World War.
Thanks.
When you
but
wait, what was the question that followed that? Sorry.
So okay, it's like all these problems. Like, well, what brought them about?
Well, I don't agree with your defining them as liberal ideas, because there is nothing freeing about making your citizenry pay for someone else's problems. Well, liberal ideas, so liberalist ideas, are essentially every person is responsible for their own decisions. They are responsible for their own mistakes, and you should not be forced to pay for somebody else's mistakes, whether that be by letting people into your country, or by, for instance, even going so far as paying for some obese person's healthcare because they've spent their whole life eating 6,000 calories a day, doing no walking, and drinking about 10 cans of Foster's. It's not my responsibility to pay for someone else's mistakes.
Are you attacking the NHS, you monster?
I bloody am. Yeah.
Sargon will kick you out for this, but
it's fine.
I'm kidding, but okay, the thing is the African thing can be justified on liberal grounds because they sort of take a holistic view that this frees more people in the long run. It's just a little bit of tax money, relatively speaking, and because they assume that if they spend enough money, they will create modern economies in Africa, and with that assumption, it actually does make sense to take people's money, just a little bit of people's money, and send it there.
Yeah,
of course, that doesn't work out. So it's silly. But so now they think they have to bring them to Europe to get them to work. But
which they don't, as we've seen.
Yeah, it doesn't work either. But then they just blame racism because they'll always just find a new excuse. But what I would say is are you guys familiar with the protests in Paris of '68?
Remind me.
Yes.
Let's pretend.
It was basically a bunch of bourgeois communist students sort of doing these demonstrations against Americanism and capitalism, and really mostly it was against sexual morality because a lot of them were sexual libertines, and it was basically hippie free love in Paris. And I bring that up because
it was more Marxist than hippie.
It was sort of.
Is there a difference?
It was new Marxism. It's the sort of Frankfurt style we see. So that's just a distinction I want to make because it's important here. Basically, they in addition to making Marxist arguments, they made appeals to liberal philosophy to argue against basically any sort of authoritarianism. They build themselves as anti-authoritarian. And I'm just sort of, I have to say, isn't this sort of the problem with liberalism, that outright Marxists could use its arguments to basically live out their little fantasy?
No, they can't. Because I'll tell you why. If they were to implement a Marxist society, then they would have to force people to work and to give up their property.
Oh,
which
no,
is
no,
an
no.
infringement on property rights.
These rich kids were never going to implement a Marxist society. They just wanted things to be easier for them. And,
then fuck them.
And a lot of them are German Euro MPs now. Actually, not German. One of them is a German Euro MP. I just read that. But a lot of them are members of the European Parliament now, and they're now pro-market, pro-European, libertarian, liberal, and ecologist. I mean, this is one guy in particular. I can actually link the article in the little sidebar. But I mean, isn't this is an interesting evolution, isn't it? I mean, it shows me that liberalism isn't just kind of what you guys say.
Yes, but wait a minute. That's like saying that if you hold nationalist views, you are enabling fascists.
Well, I mean, I would not deny that fascists are part of the nationalist tradition, though.
And that's the okay. So that's the problem.
I would say you'd have to say these guys represent the liberal tradition more than you guys do, as bad as that is, because they're European MPs.
No,
Okay, well,
I don't think that's the case. Realistically, the idea is you don't judge the form of something by its denatured state. You judge something in its healthy state.
Well, but I'm trying to judge it by its results, though, because the results is that these guys who you deemed were illiberal, they've inherited these liberal democracies. They're the ones in power now, not you guys.
And they're not implementing Marxism.
Let me just say, you judge it by both its denatured and healthy states, because things always are going to decline and degenerate, and you need to know what that's going to look like.
Sure, but you know what the form of something is by its healthy state.
But but liberalism's not in a healthy state; it's in a very sick state at the moment.
Okay,
let me say that sounds a little like.
I disagree.
So, for instance, what policies is the UK government or the Labour Party pushing that's liberal?
Okay, none exactly. Okay, can I say one thing?
There we go.
Go ahead.
There we go.
Okay,
So
can I respond to that though? Is this
okay?
My belief that liberalism destroys civilizations. It doesn't do the same. It doesn't like destroy them the way Marxism does, where it just causes everyone to starve.
Yeah.
It destroys it because it weakens the civilization by stripping away the necessary defense mechanisms to uphold it, by allowing its hostile forces to subvert it and turn it into something that's hostile to what the civilization was in the first place. So, of course, Jeremy Corbyn is not liberal in your sense, but he's using the current system completely legally to destroy it. And you are allowing him to do that.
Wait a minute, I don't see Jeremy Corbyn winning yet. Okay.
Well,
he lost against the weakest Tory government in about 100 years.
Okay, it doesn't matter though, because the point is that he could win, and he's actively trying to undermine the current Britain using their own system.
Okay. But
I would also say, let me just say something.
He has to promise people free tuition. He's promising people younger than 25 free buses. He's having to promise economic falsehoods in order to win. He's not winning on the strength of possible ideas. He's winning on the assumption from ill-informed students that they can have a free life.
But the point I'm trying to make is that.
Let me say something.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
That would still be winning, and also I would say Tony Blair was probably more dangerous anyway, and he won 4 times.
Yeah, he did win. So I wasn't voting age though. So don't blame me.
I don't blame you, but he basically went on a campaign of deception to quadruple immigration. He changed the way you recorded crime statistics to hide a rise in crime. He relied on surveys instead of actual stats taking. He straight up, he told his PR people to not even talk about immigration benefits because people would be suspicious if they did.
Yeah.
So he went on a massive campaign of, I don't need to say all this, but basically Jeremy Corbyn won 4 times under Your Democracy, and he's not Jeremy Corbyn. Tony Blair's won 4 times under Your Democracy, and he's done more damage than Jeremy Corbyn could. And he's also, I would say, he's probably more liberal than Jeremy Corbyn, but that's small. That's a small difference. Yeah. But I think the point we're making is, I notice this a lot with Skeptic talks about how illiberal academia has become. The problem with academia was it wasn't that it lost a liberal voice. It's that it lost any sort of conservative or chauvinistic voice first. and then progressives were able to totally displace liberal voices very easily, because it was ultimately the chauvinistic, conservative, right-wing professors, and there used to be some during like the silent generation. It was about like 70-30, 60-40, not equal, but enough. It was them who were basically holding back the bullshit. It wasn't liberals.
A free democratic society needs a conservative side and the liberal side.
But the point is that in a free democratic society, like a liberal society, whichever one gets enough power will eventually suppress the other one. And because that's what's happened in academia.
And that's what's happening now. I mean, like every time the Labor Party wins, they open the borders, let in as many people as they can, and then they'll lose again because people get tired of immigration and think the Tories will fix it. Ha ha, funny.
Which they don't,
yeah. And then the Labor will eventually win again, just do the same thing. They're just kind of playing this war by attrition. And I don't see a liberal solution to that, and that is something I think liberalism needs a solution to, because that's like civilizational.
What is it that you think liberalism needs a solution to?
Specifically, the issue of mass immigration, but also a lot of issues of civilizational health. I mean, have you ever read Camp of the Saints?
Camp of the Saints? No, I haven't.
Okay, neither have I. But the joke is, I've read like the second half of it. But John Raspail's, he himself has said, he's the author, has said it's a criticism of liberalism, in that liberalism does a very poor job of defending itself, because basically the society in Camp of the Saints is so guilt-ridden, so concerned about emancipating humanity and openness to the world, that it basically just lets everyone from the third world in and just destroys itself.
Yes,
I would disagree that that's even liberalism, because like we've said, we are all against mass immigration.
Well, I mean, yes.
Okay, but the point is that the point
I would
make. Let me just say this. The point I would make is, and I'll shut up for a little while. The point I would make is, yes, you're against mass immigration, and you can rationalize it with your liberalism. But as I said at the beginning, most liberals score very high in openness, so they actually have a hard time arguing against mass immigration.
Yeah, but then I would just argue that the people that you're defining as liberal aren't actually the liberalists, the people who believe in truly liberal ideas, not progressive.
Okay,
well, then we're almost into no true communism territory.
It's an argument of definitions, and like I was said to Endeavour, I would talk about this. One thing I notice when people talk about abortion is that you have the pro-life side, which say that the fetus is a human. It's a baby. Then you have the pro-choice that say, oh, the fetus isn't a baby. It's not human, it's just a lump of cells. So it's not even a question of whether or not abortion is right. It's a question of the actual existential and biological state of the fetus. In which case, no debate is actually happening, since two people are just having two different definitions.
Well, I mean,
it's
more than the difference in definitions. We've also argued that liberalism is very easy to supplant by hostile forces, as Endeavour has. And I would also argue
because it's hard.
It's not
eventually, liberalism eventually kind of devolves into what we're seeing. That's sort of, I think, as Benedict said, we're sort of seeing the denatured version of liberalism. And that's why we're sort of arguing this is not sufficient for civilization. We need something else. Even if we want to hold on to liberalism, we need something else.
But
a question I want to ask.
Well, let's let Benedict speak. Okay.
Cedarwood. Yeah, I mean, I think that's true, that in a sense, every society is going to denature at some point. That's something that Plato brought up in his Republic. My argument would be that liberalism is the thing that denatures the slowest, and it's the thing that is most resilient.
Okay, I'd have to actually disagree with that.
Yeah, Endeavour can take this one.
Okay, well, I'd like to ask first, like, Brandon, you say that we don't have liberalism right now. Which era did we have real liberalism, as per your definition?
Oh yeah, no true Scotsman. Yeah, that's right. It is very hard. I don't really think there has been a period of true liberalism. Really, there have been some people who have pushed for liberalist ideas, and then there have been people who have pushed against them. For instance, with the introduction of affirmative action, that's entirely illiberal, since it ultimately acts as a reward and punishment for people based on immutable characteristics for things that happened in the past that are out of their control. But then again, you have the ideas of democracy that give people some sense of accountability over the people in charge. So there have been. I'm not saying that we could ever reach a truly liberalist society, but it's I deem it a good to be pushing towards this society, to push for these principles of freedom of speech and absolute freedom of speech. So even
what I was going to ask though is because the argument that I often hear from people like Sargon and stuff is that the 90s was like the best era for that. Would you agree that maybe from the 60s to the 90s would that be like a liberal, more closer to liberalism than today?
I was born at the end of the 90s, man. I don't remember it.
I remember them.
I can't really give an opinion.
Well, in the 90s, it seemed like the free society has won, but it was never. But it was just wishful thinking. It's not a lot of naive talk in the 90s. Because in the 90s, basically after the collapse of communism, everybody wanted democracy, and many countries all over the world passed democratic constitutions and all that, but they were not ready for democracy, and so you saw them sliding back in the past 2 decades.
Well, wouldn't you say that the Western democracies, that kind of system that was in place then is falling apart right now?
I don't see it falling apart. I disagree with you guys that it is falling apart. I think there's always ups and downs and pendulum swings and all that, and we've been in worse times in the past, and at the moment what we are seeing is, yes, there's this there has been this rise of anti-liberal left, but what we're seeing now is that there is a counter to that, a reaction to that, which is rising on basically right now on the internet, but will eventually become mainstream.
Okay.
I would even disagree that it's just on the internet. Look at the rise of nationalist parties in Europe. It's already happening. So
on the continent.
Okay, but here's the thing, though. All the problems right now were brought about by I'd say a large portion of them were brought about by the misconceptions that were made in that era. Like, for example, Tony Blair's immigration policy, and I think it was 1997, that was decided upon 20 years ago during this, this supposed era of liberal greatness. And we're only now seeing the effects of that. But I mean, Zarathustra, that's irreversible without extreme measures that are not liberal in any way, shape, or form.
I mean, you think. Okay, no, go ahead. Because you are, first of all, you are assuming that all immigrants will not integrate, and I disagree with that. And how
many will?
A lot will, and because eventually people do integrate in society.
Well, it's not happening though.
Look,
not with that levels.
Let me give you my country again as an example. No country after World War II has taken in more immigrants compared to the size of the population than Israel, relative to the size of the population.
Yes, but they were targeting. They knew which ones they were taking, though.
Almost all of these immigrants came from non-democratic countries. They had non-democratic traditions. They came from Arab countries. They came from the former Soviet Union. They came from Ethiopia, and they are all integrating and becoming part of the Israeli democracy.
Okay, the reason for that is because almost all of those immigrants were Jewish, and they are going to specifically be part of a Jewish state with their interests in mind, and with their particular identity to be upheld. The problem is that in the West, that's not what's happening. The current Western democracies are deconstructing their own identities and allowing themselves to be shaped by the.
So this is something that you need to reverse, and this is not illegal.
How can you reverse that using liberalism?
Because nationalism, I said in the beginning, has a nationalist and a liberal past. There is a liberal form of nationalism, and because if you go back to the 19th century, nationalism was
in the 19th
coming together and to be free countries.
First of all, let's be honest. The 19th century compared to now was not liberal at all. Most today would not call it.
Yeah, but that was
also those nations were homogeneous. They didn't have to deal with an immigrant population already there, so there needs to be something added to that.
Yeah,
I guess the best solution would be
strengthening of the national identity, which every immigrant will have to adopt.
Okay, but in America, we have a community that's been here since the beginning, and they haven't integrated.
Guys,
This is kind of the thing we're getting to. I guess we have to.
Wait, which community isn't integrating?
Blacks.
Well, I disagree that they're not integrating. You have a lot of blacks. You have a lot of blacks who have integrated.
Well, the point is that they share their own identity. They identify with their own identity much more than they would
As an American.
Americanism.
Look, you say they've been there from the start, but it's not that they came there by their own volition. Yeah, so there's a problem there. It's not a choice when you choose to come to a certain country. It's not the same as when you're being forced.
Okay, well, okay.
This is the history.
Hispanics come here.
This is the history. This is the history that you have to work out of. But what I'm seeing is, if you look at the historical processes, you are seeing that blacks are slowly integrating. That they are slowly learning to think of themselves as American.
Well, I would disagree because it seems like they're doubling down on their blackness more and more each year.
That's at the moment.
Also, I would say Hispanics come here by choice, by volition, and yet even in the third generation, they're more similar to first generation Hispanics than the average American.
Well, and again, I also want to pose this question is because we can talk about all these things in abstract, but the reality is that the current political forces in power right now in these liberal democracies are extremely against any of these, even civic nationalism, which I think is not a solution either, but there's extremely against any form of preventing the increasing of all the problems we're discussing right now. Because the reason that Justin Trudeau will never criticize Islam, the reason he'll say that female genital mutilation is not barbaric, is because he knows very well that that's a demographic that he can get 90% of the votes for, and that it's going to be under his policies, it's going to be a bigger and bigger and bigger demographic. Same reason Jeremy Corbyn is the same way, because he knows he can get the Labour Party gets 90% of the Muslim vote. There's nothing to restrain them from enacting these policies that will bring about these changes, and liberalism has no solution.
And I would like to add, I noticed that the Western nations with the hardest times dealing with immigration, that have basically no anti-immigration party that's doing well at all, are the Anglo ones, which are the most liberal. That's interesting to me. I mean, apparently French Canada is still pretty nationalistic, and they're obviously not Anglo. It seems to be the dreaded collectivist continent that's doing the best on this one.
If I can jump in here for a sec, I'd like to address something in the chat, because
go ahead.
Doragoon01 has been posting a lot of interesting things. One of them was, what liberalism really needs is a metaphysical foundation for morality. And
he's arguing for religion, by the way.
Yeah, and I think fundamentally that seems to be a mistake a lot of people make, and they seem to think there isn't a strong metaphysical foundation behind liberalism.
Well, and originally what it was Christianity. It was because it was meant to function in a Christian civilization with Christian values enforced, and which today would be considered illiberal. It was meant to function within that system.
Yeah.
No, I really don't think it would be considered illiberal today. I think fundamentally
considered illiberal today, but a lot of people would have problems with it.
I think fundamentally we need to, if we think about what we're discussing, what we're fundamentally discussing is political philosophy. And the question is, how do we set up how do we set up society? That's the essential question of political philosophy. Mm-hmm. And in order to ask, how do we set up society? I think we need to say, well, society is a society of men. So what is a man? In other words, what distinguishes human beings from all other creatures?
Okay.
We can beat them up. But,
okay, yep, continue.
But what is it? But what is it that has given us the ability to beat them up? What has put us above everything else? Clearly, it's our intellect, specifically our ability to reason.
And our opposable thumbs.
Okay.
And where does reason? What do we mean by reason? Reason essentially is the ability for us to distinguish between different things and to be able to treat like things as like in the way they are alike, and unlike things as unlike in the way that they are unlike. And
okay, yeah, go continue.
This allows us to make rational choices, and it's those choices that allow us what we call morality. Morality, what we mean by moral, what is good, is fundamentally, what is it that contributes to our self-flourishing. And unlike other creatures, men can reason, and through their reason, we can make choices about how we self-flourish. And this gives a certain level of agent relativity. In other words, while as human beings, our flourishing has objective characteristics, like we all need relationships, we all need food, we all need water, we all need the necessities of life, we all need some kind of dignified labor, all these things. But there are different quantities and qualities of these things for different people. For some people, marriage is part of their self-flourishing. For other people, perhaps it's not marriage, but cultivating, a strong circle of friends. The priesthood is another option. The point I'm getting at is that there's agent relativeness among human beings in all things, except universally our reason and our ability to make moral choices. So what liberalism is arguing is not, hey, we're going to have these liberal structures because there is no fundamental identity of human nature, but in fact, because there is such a strong fundamental identity of human nature, because we have this deep metaphysical background, that's why we argue for liberalism.
Well, one of the major flaws I see is that liberalism tends to believe that man in nature is liberal. That liberalism is the default state of man. Go ahead.
Of course we argue. Well, of course we argue that, in a sense, man is liberal because.
Well, I mean, the reality is that that's very little evidence to prove that, because man in nature was, I'd say, extremely violent. And I think needs that sense of order, whereas liberalism kind of sees that he's not violent in nature, and he can flourish by removing these restrictions upon him. And I just think that there's so much evidence to prove that man in nature is not this great being. He's not a liberal being.
At the beginning, my argument was liberalism presupposes a certain level of social cohesion, and that's sort of what Endeavor is saying now too.
I don't think that's necessarily the case, because yeah, sure, man has violent characteristics, but he also has in himself those characteristics that challenge that violence.
Well, I don't see them coming about though.
I mean, like Jonathan Haidt talks about all our reflexes like disgust and valuing loyalty and stuff like that. Is very clearly during our ancestral environment we had a very tribal mentality, not a very high-minded liberal one, because that's where all these reflexes come from.
Okay, so one thing I wanted to ask you guys, because Sargon always talks about identity politics and how horrible it is, and can I just ask, like, do you guys know why? What do you guys think is the reason that these countries are able to pass things like affirmative action? They're allowed to demonize the whites in their academy. They're allowed to do all these things. Well, can I ask why do you guys think that's happening?
Because liberalism is really hard. It's really hard for people to take responsibility for their actions. People do not like to admit that they are responsible.
The reason that, well, okay, but I mean, you wouldn't be able to get away with blaming with publicly saying the same thing about Jews or really any other minority. Why can you say that about whites though in their own countries?
No, I'm saying that every group, whether or not they recognize that liberalism's hard, they know that there are easier solutions. The reason people were, buy into socialism at a young age, like I did, was because it was like, oh, hey, yeah, it would be easy and nice if everyone was just given what they need.
Okay,
Yeah,
the point I'm trying to get at though,
it's easy.
What I'm trying to say though is that the reason that there's all these anti-white policies, in the academy, in the media, it's because there's no white identity group, there's no white interest group, and it's this it's individualism that's really allowing us to be taken advantage of. Because you see a white progressive, when they hear the word like white supremacy or something, they think, oh, they're just talking about racists. But the problem is that other groups don't see it that way. They associate the entire white group as that, and this is it's a losing strategy to say, well, we need to be individuals. We need to be individuals.
No, I would go further. All of critical race theory says that it's all white people.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and I would do away with all identity politics. There's no.
How are you going to do that though?
Well, no, I single-handedly can't, tell everyone. I can't make everyone not believe.
What's the point?
But I can push these ideas that say you are an individual, you will succeed.
But no one believes that though.
But I mean, that's the kind of point we're making.
People do believe it.
You yourself say.
The problem is, people
you yourself say
educated, saying that if you fail, it's because you're black. People were raised like that now in America and in the UK and in Germany. And if that's all, like I said, when you're a child, you're a sponge. And if you're raised in situations saying that you're going to fail because you're a woman and because you don't have a fucking dick, then guess what? From that young age, you're going to believe it. That's why people become Christians. That's why people become Islamic. Because they were raised in it.
Let me say this. That's literally the other side using coercive state mechanisms to own you, and that's why you yourself said liberalism is hard. That's true, but that means two things. One, it means every other ideology has an advantage over it because every other ideology.
It's easy,
and also it means to me that liberalism should probably sort of hitch its wagon to something else that can also establish itself very easily, like some sort of identitarian impulse.
Because that would require to surrender principles, and
not as many as you think, though. Because
the problem I think we're having in this discussion.
Let me finish. Back when America, for example, was basically a white ethno state, it had a smaller government. It had more freedom in many ways. It was as liberal as it could be. It was the 19th century liberalism we seem to like. So I don't think it's actually as much in contradiction as you think. Now go ahead.
Well, okay, here's the reason. Because you can say like that these things are bad. You can say that identity politics is bad, but these are tribalistic things. They're naturally in people. And the reason is that they're so politically powerful for that reason. The left, the people that you're opposing, have no reason whatsoever to give up these policies because it's a political juggernaut. We could actually be able to stand up to these things if there actually was like a white collective, because okay, for example, in the U.S., you could never get away with teaching a class about Jewish privilege because the ADL would sue you out of existence. So if we actually had like a collective to actually stand up against these things, there might not be professors calling up for us to be sterilized.
Okay, let me just jump in.
Of course.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I talk about that a lot on my channel. Identity politics was liberal until a short while ago, because it became apparent that there are things in group identities. There are certain group identities that prevent people from achieving equality of opportunity. People don't even remember that now, but there was such a thing as homophobia. People were actually afraid of gay people. They were afraid to be associated with them. They're afraid to be near them. So gay people, to be gay was basically a death sentence. And black people, because of the ways of thinking of the past, were seen as kind of inferior people, kind of people that belong to a less progressed stage. So all of this and we're talking about until really 20 years ago, all of this prevented certain groups from achieving equality of opportunity. So liberals worked to change that, to fix that.
Okay, but if we have equality of
wait a minute, let me finish. Then the radical left piggybacked on that and took that and gave it basically a dialectic Marxist interpretation, where you have this class of straight white males that is the oppressive class, and the rest are the oppressed classes, and so but because liberals now realize that, a liberal like me, I realize that identity politics is obsolete now, and a lot of other liberals are also realizing that, and gays are realizing that they don't need now. They basically can live just life, and they don't have to come together to fight for their rights and all that, because they already have rights and all that.
This isn't what's happening though.
Because of that, basically this whole identity politics things have no grounds to stand on and will collapse.
They're winning elections, though. I mean, it's not obsolete. That's
okay. Yeah, there's that, but at the same time, like, if equality is true, and we have this equality of opportunity, shouldn't something resembling equality of outcome happen? But that's obviously not happening, though. So
why would outcome follow opportunity?
We have equality. We have pretty much equality of outcome. People are living comfortably.
I don't see that. I mean, if you look at just look at the statistics in the country like the U.S. The reason that the reason that black identity politics is so powerful is because they aren't having an equality of outcome. They are on average a lot poorer than the average person in the U.S. Wouldn't you say?
I think that it is identity politics that is causing that.
That
if they get out of the victim mentality, that they will advance in society.
You said that it's going away, but I mean, 90% of African Americans still vote Democrat. I think it was like 80% of gays still vote Democrat. These things aren't going away.
That doesn't mean that they believe in identity politics.
Well, they're voting for the party that's running on that, on identity politics directed towards that.
But it's going to collapse.
Zarathustra, blacks who identify as conservatives still vote for the Democrat Party. It's definitely an identity thing. Identity, that's not
well, they're running on, not necessarily on political belief, but more on like a tribalistic one, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, but that's not the same as believing that you have to group together to fight for your it's not the same as believing that you are being oppressed because of your group identity.
But I mean, if it's politically viable and if it gets you what you want, why wouldn't you do it?
Because it's entirely dishonest.
Well, it doesn't matter if it's dishonest. It works.
I care that it's dishonest.
You're going to get more people like Kanye West to say, "Wait a minute, what are we talking about?"
Okay, but
Kanye West is kind of obviously stupid, though. Come on.
Yeah. Okay. So.
It means it's not really a stable foundation to build anything off of. And we don't actually even...
Once it has no grounds to stand on, it will eventually collapse.
Midterms haven't even happened yet, so we don't know if Kanye even made a difference, and he probably didn't. It's just, this is a lot of wishful thinking to base the future off of, in my opinion.
Yeah, and this goes back to my point on why I'm against liberalism, is because...
Based on...
Okay, guys, you keep saying, well, these things will go away, And then when I say, well, they're not going away, and I mean the argument seems to be, well, they're bad. But the thing is, you have no answer to deal with any of these things. Like, if okay, let's take South Africa for example. In 1994, when apartheid ended, they introduced a liberal constitution. South Africa was meant to be a liberal democratic state, just like one of them in Europe or in America. One of the clauses that the Afrikaners had Nelson Mandela agree to was that he agreed as a compromise to put up in their constitution that you cannot expropriate land without compensating the people that you're taking it from. South Africa's just democratically voted that to reverse that because they have a super majority. The whites only have a 10% stake in the population. There's no way they can oppose this democratically. The ANC and the EFF in South Africa. Okay, the ANC, like, they're not necessarily concerned with taking away the white South Africans' property, and the EFF, they're not necessarily against taking away their lives. How do you deal like that?
South Africa never had a chance to be a liberal democracy because the people
why?
are not ready. Because the people there are not ready for it yet.
Why aren't they ready for it though?
Well, maybe we're not ready for it either.
You need the Yes, I mean, look, it's a fairly new thing, and you ask why I think that those things will go away, because I've seen because things in the past have went away. There have been you talked about the 60s, the late 60s, this rise of Marxism eventually just collapsed because
it collapsed because they all got jobs basically, and then just went into the EU and then peddled their own proggy bullshit just with more capital.
No, the ideology collapsed because a lot of actually in the academy, a lot of people started to say, wait a minute, it's not working. We are talking nonsense here.
When did this collapse in the academy? It's more radical than ever.
This seems almost religious, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I see no reason why. There's too many people benefiting from these trends that we think is wrong. And the point I'm trying to get across is that liberalism is allowing for all these things to happen out of principle because it has no self-defense mechanisms. It has to afford its opponents, the opponents of the people of the civilization who implemented liberalism originally, it has to allow, under principle, the hostile forces to subvert it. And once those subvert it, it will overturn liberalism and the system dies.
Martin Luther was a hostile force against the church. And yeah, I'm pretty sure that everyone's happy now that they can read their Bible, now that it's not in Latin.
Okay, well, what's that have to do with this,
Galileo was a hostile force by saying, actually, no, but, I mean, the Earth isn't the center of the universe. The Earth orbits the sun.
In order to use these metaphors, you'd have to argue that like progressivism is like actually a good thing.
That's okay. Are you arguing that like
I'm giving examples when a hostile force can be beneficial? So we have to allow.
So could Islam be beneficial for Britain?
Well, I mean,
no. I understand
your point. I understand your point, but these are like civilizational issues that we're facing down, and that's sort of, I mean, the margin for error is extremely small, and we can't replicate the experiment. So I think we have to say, at this stage, we have to be wary of hostile forces.
I mean, because here's the thing: it's like, is Islam? Could the Muslims end up anxiety for us? Well, maybe we should just give them a chance to just give them a chance. Let's see if they do. I mean, like, I'm not. We've read their book. We know that it's a bad idea. Okay, but I'm not, like, for me, it's I'm not willing to accept a solution that saying, well, the people that want to castrate my children, I'm not willing to accept a solution saying, well, let's give them a chance to teach this in schools. Let's give them a chance to experiment on a few kids.
No, I didn't say teach it in school. I didn't say teach it in school.
I mean, I think that's a straw man right there.
Let people present their ideas, and then when someone says, actually, I think we should follow this book that was written down by the followers of an illiterate man who was approached in a cave by an angel one day. We should base our entire political system and judicial system off of this book. There's going to be no separation of church and state. Yeah, we're just going to follow this book. So no, fuck off.
But
I do not care for your book that claims that elephants were hit by stones and turned to grass. Just no.
Well, that's just cool, and that's your problem if you don't accept that. But I'll take this one endeavor. Okay, but the thing is that once they have the demographic numbers, they can do that. I know you're against that, but again, the societies and the parties which are actually rising to deal with that are not particularly liberal. You have got PIS in Poland, which is actually criticized for being very illiberal. You've got Orban, who's also said, I'm turning my back on liberal democracy. You've got the evil collectivists, the liberal continent. You know, they're the ones doing the best job of it. The consensus-based societies, and even in like Sweden, are actually doing a much better job of it than Anglo societies, who have basically no real anti-immigration party. They just have their center-right parties, which don't do anything.
Okay,
America and Australia being the best off. And so I think this is an issue of theory not meeting reality. That's just kind of how I see it.
Okay, just a minute. You spoke about demographics.
Yeah.
As far as when I looked, it seemed to me that it will take until the end of the century for Muslims to be about 18% of the European population at current growth, which is the population they have in Israel. And in Israel, they are not controlling they are not dominating.
Well, Israel's another great example because Netanyahu basically won the last election by saying Arabs were basically going to vote him out, so Jews, you better get.
So
okay. Let me respond to that.
That's
that's I've looked at these numbers. That's Europe as a whole. Okay, the Israeli birth rate is enough that it can sustain the Jewish population versus the Muslim population. Yeah. Secondly, they're not importing a bunch more. And so the 18% figure, that's including Europe as a whole. That's also including countries like Poland, Hungary, Czech Republic, which are taking zero. By 2050, with high migration numbers, countries like Sweden will be like 20 or 30%. Britain could be about 20 or 30%. This is due to on Pew Research. I think Britain was like 18%,
and that's a pretty shit tier situation.
Yeah, that's a massive number. These numbers on paper don't sound bad, but in practice, that's insane.
And they'll be younger too.
Yeah, and they'll be younger. So they're gonna like the average within 32 years. It's very likely that the average fighting age man in Sweden will be Muslim.
And also, I would like to add, demographers also said California would never become minority white. It already is majority. Like Hispanics are the largest plurality, not even whites. So they've been wrong before. Yeah. Let me just put it that way.
Like Israel's set up to prevent that from to ensure that the Israeli population remains the majority, that it remains a Jewish state. These Western democracies are not set up that way, and the politicians running them have an explicit interest in making them not. Or in making them a larger percentage Islamic. That's what I mean.
Okay, and they will eventually be voted out. These politicians,
hopefully.
Voted out. Okay, but voted out after they've massively shifted the demographics, and then they have all these blocks.
I mean, I'm worried they will get voted out, but it'll be by like an Islamic party or something.
They'll get voted out, but will the populations they bring in be sent back?
No, but look.
Then the problems already happened.
You said that Israel is set up to prevent that, but not in anti-democratic means. Okay, so
I would say it's more like a democratic means. It's neither. It's just not even it doesn't even have an opinion on democracy at all. They just do it.
Yeah. What?
Yeah. I like policy.
Like I mean, I don't like the situation we have is extremely different because the politicians that are running our countries, they have an explicit interest in this happening, and it's going to be disastrous for me, my future descendants, and really just any situation that I'd actually want to live in.
And you really think that the politicians don't care about their descendants?
Well, they don't have
no, because a lot of them don't have descendants. Like Theresa May doesn't, Angela Merkel doesn't, Macron doesn't, and a lot of them is like they're rich. They can afford to like section themselves off. I can't afford that, you know.
I think you guys have
pessimistic.
Too much of a dark outlook, because that's not how humans behave. Humans, when they sense danger, they act.
Yeah, well, I'd say that us on the far right are sensing danger, and the point I'm trying to say is that I don't see liberalism as preventing any of this stuff from happening. I in fact see it as being very instrumental towards this happening in the future.
No, I would disagree, because for instance, one of the books I'm planning on writing is essentially a detailed analysis of the incompatibility of the Quran with English society.
Well, then why is it being allowed in then?
So why is Islam being allowed?
Well, then why, if it's incompatible, why are they so well
educated? People are not educated on the problem of Islam. They do not. Hardly anybody has read the book. When I say to people, "Oh, did you know in the 4th surah it says that if your wife acts as like a bad Muslim, you're meant to tell her off, then ignore her, and then beat her.
Okay, but how are you going to change this with the education system?
Well, I mean,
I think that's one of the importance of religious education in school. It's like, oh hey, this is what Christians believe. This is what Muslims believe.
But you have no way of imposing this. The education system right now tells you that Islam is the most amazing thing in the world.
Let me go.
Because they're dishonest, and that is a major problem. We have to work our way up.
As you said, the education system is dishonest and doing like the opposite of what you said. You also kind of have a problem with educating children on principle because they don't know any better. That's going to be a hurdle that your enemies don't share. But also, I would say, as the YouTuber Distributors tried to point out, Sargon, liberals in general kind of do a bad job educating the youth. To be honest, that's how progressives owned you. Basically, let's be honest. They just got to the kids, and then the kids didn't agree with you, and then you were kind of screwed.
All right. So, okay, a question I want to pose to you guys is that I'd say one of my biggest criticisms with the idea of the liberalists and the idea of the movement is that I see liberalism it's pretty much it's policy, and for me, I see policy as a means to an end. If you ask me what I want out of the world, what I want is I want to be a part of a nation that I can be proud of. I want to have a community I can be part of. I want to partake in a culture that I enjoy. And I want to be able to pass that on to the future generations. And the policies I would support would be something that I believe would help me attain that. And the reason I'm opposed to liberalism is that I feel it's hostile towards these interests, and honestly hostile towards my own self-preservation. But let me finish. Can I hold on? The question I want to pose is what's your ends? Like what value do you see yourselves getting out of liberalism?
Yeah, I would like to ask you what would you think would work better. But let's see. What's the end of look? Liberalism is not supposed to be my identity, my spirituality. Liberalism is just the political political ideology or political system that will enable me to live out, to express my look for my spirituality, express it, and all that. It's not a way of life. Liberalism. It's just a political ideology.
Yeah, exactly. But like, what do you want to achieve from that, though? So I get the sense that what you're trying to achieve is freedom, correct?
Yes, freedom to go my way and fulfill my what's there's this word that I forgot, but basically to be
self-determination or self-actualization.
Okay, yeah, self-actualization, exactly.
Okay. The thing is, though, I don't see that man in nature. I don't see making him free necessarily makes him a better being. Well, at least absolute freedom, like freedom without responsibility.
No, that's not what we want. We want freedom with responsibility. So you are free to go and murder people, but you might be murdered back.
The 68 Paris protest shows that people do want freedom without responsibility, and they
here's the thing. I see a system that's entirely.
And there isn't a whole lot to stop them.
It lasted for 3 days. That's all it did. 3 days. That's all.
But
yeah,
okay,
and then they went on to become MPs and then make a lot of decisions.
Because
probably by being dishonest.
Yeah, but that's always going to be a thing.
Yeah, exactly.
We have to. A political system has to expect people are just going to lie and try to cheat it.
Yeah, okay, but here's the problem. Like I see that this view of freedom, it seems to suggest though that without any underlying purpose to society, so without any kind of religion or national identity or any of that, it seems that the ideal person would be someone like T.J. Kirk, like just this fat, indulgent blob who just indulges in his every desire at the moment. That's because that's what I see kind of as the result of this. I kind of see that as the result of the liberalization of society. Like that's what kind of people become when they're given this freedom.
Again, only if you think that liberalism is a way of life. But like I told you,
the way of life is freedom.
I think that means Zarathustra and I kind of agree. Liberalism has to be part of a broader coalition of values than just itself. But I mean, I'm just pointing that out.
Yeah, and it was what I think is that we don't have that way of we don't have, like, liberalism's not the current system we have is not sufficient to run a civilization. Liberalism would only it can't work alone, because alone it suggests that the ideal life is T.J. Kirk, and if you had a society full of T.J. Kirks, within one generation you'd die off and you'd be replaced by a stronger
Yes,
by a
I
stronger.
agree.
Sorry, who's T.J. Kirk? I don't get
the
the
amazing
It's the
atheist.
amazing atheist.
But I would disagree, because I would say nowhere in liberalist principles does it say, entirely indulge. It's pretty much just, being left alone without having to be alone.
That's what I'm arguing.
There's not really.
You
There's
can
no
combine
argument
with
against
your Christian
indulging, I think, is
virtues
his
and your
point.
Christian morality. Then that's
what. Okay, this is what I'm arguing is that when people are just left alone, they become like T.J. Kirk and not become like an efficient, effective person of civilization.
Yeah, like if we read our Loki, he basically argues for liberalism in a broader context of the Christian tradition and to a homogeneous polity. So he sort of argues that these issues of liberalism declining into becoming like T.J. Kirk, we'll just call it that, would be handled by other intellectual traditions. And that's sort of what I think Endeavor and I are trying to say, is that liberalism's kind of eroded all its support and then just kind of got plopped off by
Okay, so then the question I would have is then, would you agree with some of our principles, like a meritocracy where the best person gets the job, where you have freedom of speech? Would those principles be compatible with a Christian world?
More or less. I think ultimately you're going to have to. I don't think you're ever going to have absolute freedom of speech. I mean, we don't even have it in the U.S., so I think you're probably going to accept some.
Yeah, that's the problem. I'd change it.
Okay, and another thing is, can I? Because what Viktor Orban did in Hungary was, he essentially he violated like George Soros's organization's right to freedom of speech, and for a good reason. And I'm fully in support of that, because I don't support giving George Soros the freedom to operate in Hungary, demoralize the people, crack open the borders, and essentially destroy destroy that Hungary as a country. I'm not going to allow him to do that just out of principle. I'm not going to just say, well, he has freedom of speech, so I'll just let him do this.
No, but freedom of speech isn't opening borders, and freedom of speech is
okay. But freedom of speech.
This isn't immigration. This is like exchange of money to form organizations with Hungarian workers.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. It's not
Guys,
freedom.
It seems to me that there seems to be a bit of an assumption that when we say individual, we're talking about something like Randian's individuals, like atomized individuals.
No, I mean, T.J. Kirk is actually a good example, because he's like a left liberal, as he calls himself, which means he doesn't want anyone to tell him what to do, but he also wants to be taken care of by the state, and that's kind of
and that's that's clearly not what we're talking about when we speak about individual men. We're talking about men in the fullness and complexity of their humanness.
Okay, but can I ask? Would you be, because George Soros isn't forcing Hungary's borders open. What he would do is he'd buy up media companies, force propaganda upon the Hungarian people, form education systems which will demonize their culture, demonize their identity, and then lobby so hard for this open borders. Like, yeah, so he's not literally there opening the border himself, but he's using that system to do that in effect. And that, to me, I'd be in total favor of Hungary just telling him to go fuck himself, and
sorry, when you say Hungary, do you mean the Hungarian government or the Hungarian people?
Well, no, the Hungarian government did it. Yeah. Viktor Orban did this. Yeah, he imposed policies which explicitly prevented George Soros from. Well, I mean, the policy was that he taxed them out of. He taxed his organization basically out of operations. But the policy was explicitly meant to prevent George Soros's view of the world from being propagated. And I believe that's legitimate.
Yeah. Okay. In Israel, we have this concept of defensive democracy, which you say democracy has to defend itself, and sometimes do things like that. But it is dangerous.
Well, we don't have that in the West, though.
Yeah, it is a dangerous thing. Yeah, you can, because you open up. We all realize you open up this way to basically to anti-democratic if you by wanting to defend democracy from Soros, you might open it up to other problems when you do things like that. So that's a problem. And but a concept of defensive democracy, again, maybe you should adopt it. I think that you can learn from Israel.
I mean, I think I agree with a lot of the things Zarathustra was saying, but the thing is that I find the liberal view of the world, and a lot of the people like Sargon of Akkad and people like this, they're so strongly opposed to the far right actually imposing any of these things in our states. I mean, so it seems like it's kind of sounding like defense for me, but not for thee.
Well,
yeah,
no,
we're opposed to you
not so much
imposing
for,
it. We're opposed to you imposing it, but as far as
if you can't impose it, it's not going to happen, though.
Well, that suggests that it's simply not a good, a policy that the people want.
Well, I mean, no, because the free rider problem suggests that there are many things people can benefit from that they don't necessarily want to pay for themselves. That's why there is a free rider problem. But for Zarathustra's Serpent's example, I would point out that Israel is actually becoming more Jewish. I mean, the birth rates alone make it more Jewish each year. It also has migration in, which is largely Jewish. So the defensive democracy thing is nice, but it's kind of easy because you have the cards stacked in your favor. So it's a little you can get away with doing less than we would need to do to fix our demographic situation. So I don't think it's an entirely comparable situation. I just want to point that out.
This is a new thing, because in the past our population would grow much faster than the Jewish population.
Yeah.
And what changed was that the Arabs the birth rate among the Arabs went down because they became more westernized. By being part of Israeli society.
More westernized in like the worst ways. Even the unassimilated immigrants in Europe and America see a dramatic birth rate decline within like 2 generations or so. It's still like too much time passes with them having a high birth rate, but it does decline eventually.
Yeah. But I mean, but again, Israel's specifically set up to prevent that from happening. Western societies are being run by politicians who have an invested interest in the the decline of the native population. Like, and one thing that I wish my friend Cato was here. He could tell you better than me. But in Germany and Austria, they have a large Turkish immigrant population. They all voted for in Germany, Austria, they all voted for the furthest left parties, the most left-wing parties in these countries, but they also can vote back in Turkey. So they voted for the furthest right party. They voted for Erdogan. And because the Turkish people are loyal to Turkish blood and to the land of Turkey. The German people are loyal to liberal values. The Turkish people in Germany are still loyal to the German the Turkish blood and Turkish land. Then that's why they're voting for that. And in the Netherlands, there's this party called the Denk Party, and they're a pro-Turkish party. They want to make an anti-racism registry where they put on if you're a racist, you're on the registry, and they want to deny the Armenian genocide. They want to forbid criticisms of Erdogan. These systems are being used to undermine the original identity of these European countries, whereas Israel is a system that's designed to protect that one. That's the big difference.
And I think Europe will go in that direction.
Okay, but it's not going to be through liberal democracy, though.
Yeah,
it's going to be through.
It won't be because of a liberal party. It'll be because of some far right chauvinistic.
That's right.
Party.
Yes, it's going to be through the far right.
And that's kind of the point I'm making, is that the solutions aren't being tackled by liberalism, and maybe they were never meant to be. That's fine, but it's being tackled by other ideologies that exist sort of above liberalism.
But liberalism is it's a free society, and free society. Ideas float freely, and if the far right ideas become make more sense at the time, then they become more dominant. and the liberal society hopefully will manage to hold them back and not go full fascist.
But the self-described liberals of the think pieces and the Economist and the European Parliament all say the far right is a threat to liberal democracy. I understand you don't think they're real liberals, but I mean, again, this is just sort of a point where theory is not meeting reality very well.
Well, David, couldn't you argue on the other hand that it is what liberalism that has allowed the far right, in fact, to take back from the left? It's in fact.
No, I'd say it's more just nationalism.
In fact, isn't it? It's the fact that you have freedom of speech. It's the fact that you have constitutional rights that are protected.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not against any of those things. I'm sort of against the sacralizing of liberalism as the highest good. It's sort of like I like features of liberalism, but I don't think anyone says I tend to dislike liberals.
Hold on, this is important. This is important. I don't think anyone says it's the highest good. It's the highest good for the political order. In other words, the political...
That is what I'm talking about, so that wasn't really much different.
No, I
am just talking about politics, so...
Okay, well, there is a significant difference because, I mean, as a Catholic, I hold many values much higher than liberalism. However...
Okay, go ahead, yep.
But I have no life outside of politics, so, that's all.
Okay, finish, Benedict.
However, those values are values that I see as social values, cultural values, religious values. They are not political values. They are not values that should have coercive force in society.
Can I ask you a question though? Do you think would you be willing to, if you felt that those values and what you want for the world was under threat, would you be willing to violate someone else's liberal rights in order to prevent that?
I mean, I think it would depend the way in which they were.
Okay, so the person wasn't directly causing harm to anyone. They were using the liberal system.
Soros as an example.
Soros, for example.
Just ask if you'd go Orban on Soros.
Well, I mean, I think the important thing is to give others the same protection of law that we would give ourselves. What I think is the best example of this is the Man for All Seasons movie. There's that line by Thomas More where people are like, well, you should arrest him. And Thomas More says, well, what did he do? He still has the protection of law. And someone says, would you give the protection of law to the devil? And Thomas More makes a strong argument that, yeah, we do give the protection of law to the devil. That this country is planted thick with laws from coast to coast. Man's laws, not God's. And if you cut them down, and you're just the man to do it, do you really think you could stand upright in the winds that would blow then? Yes, I'd give the devil benefit of law for my own safety's sake.
Yeah, I understand the argument. But the thing is that in times of crisis, our liberal democracies have not behaved that way. They have suspended people's rights. They have done lots of things. They've gone to war. They've done lots of things that good liberal morality says they really shouldn't do. And there are a lot of things they do now that just aren't democratic. Like if there was a crisis in the UK tomorrow, there's not going to be a vote. They're just going to round up the people responsible and just take care of them. And that's sort of the point. I think the point we're making is I looked this up. It just came to me during this conversation is there's this group called the World Values Survey, and they take the values of different nations and put them along a chart. I'll link it in the sidebar. And the x-axis is survival versus self-expression. And on the self-expression side, you see more individualistic countries like Protestant and English-speaking countries. And on the right, you see more collectivist countries focusing on survival values. And I think what we're arguing is that we need to focus on survival. And that means for a time, we're going to have to do it at the expense of some self-expression and individualism. I think that's what the argument we're having is.
Like the reason that I would have to disagree, it's because again, like I said earlier, policy for me is a means of achieving an ends, and I mean I am thinking about self-preservation. So, I mean, I'm not willing to wait until these forces decide they want to destroy me before I just stand up to myself. Like example
sure.
of being
hold on.
Okay,
policy is a means of achieving an ends, but what ends?
Well, like I said before, faith, family, fatherland. I mean, having a nation, I can be proud of, and having this, and having a culture that I can have, and having having future generations that I can actually pass that on to. And you know, for example, okay, take like Howard Zinn for example. Like they had to let he if you don't know who he is, he's an academic from the 60s and 70s, 80s. He wrote this far left book, and it called The People's History of the United States. It's and anyone who knows about history, it's the history, and it's absolutely ridiculous. It's complete fabrications. But they had to let him into the academy because you know, you can't shut out these voices. They had to let him teach this demoralizing dogma because you have to give him his freedom of speech. And what essentially has happened is that his book is now taught as if it's fact in the academy, and they'll shut out people that oppose it. So you've let your opponent in the door, and he's not going to return the favor to you. Just like how if you allow these massive Islamic populations in, they're not gonna return the favor to you. They're not gonna be thinking about your rights when they have the chance. So that's why I believe in I'm trying to stand up for myself, and I think liberalism effectively stops me from doing that.
Yeah, and if they violate rights, then we shall deal with them as rights violators.
I don't want to wait for them to have the power to do that. I want to stop them from doing it before.
I think I can put this right way. The thing is that progressives have mastered soft power, so they don't really ever overtly coerce you, but they change society around you, and that's something I don't think liberalism is really equipped to handle. And that's kind of why I think the idea of a revanchist liberalist movement to fight progressives is a little short-lived. I mean, I think you guys are right compared to them. I think you guys will win every debate, but you'll sort of lose the war anyways.
Yep.
I think,
because you also have to understand that they don't have to, like, the progressives don't have to answer to any of us.
Oh yeah, that's.
I mean, they control the academy, they control the media. If you BTFO them in a debate, they just won't talk about it in the media. They won't report on it.
We are the media.
No.
The internet is usurping the media.
The stamp of approval matters a lot, because you need to influence you need to influence people in the upper echelons to some extent.
Okay,
but that you need to stand.
Such a small part of it
that will become the upper echelons.
Okay, YouTube can just ban our channel tomorrow, and there's nothing we can do about it. And YouTube is ideologically aligned with progressives. They can they have the power to do these things.
Yeah, they'll always find a box to put you in. And also, let's be honest, a lot of the new media is just trash. Like InfoWars is just trash.
Yeah, okay, right. But put them together, they are causing real damage. They're denting this stronghold of progressive media. And look, you said before that if everybody was a liberal, society will collapse, and I totally agree. But that's the whole thing. I am a liberal because I know that not everybody is a liberal, and I know that because of that I can be a liberal. If everybody was a liberal, society would disintegrate. If everybody was a conservative, society would decay. It would just freeze and turn to stone. So you need this interplay between liberals and conservatives.
Well, that's not what I said. What I said was that if everyone pursued absolute freedom, they'd end up being these massive degenerates like T.J. Kirk. If everyone believed in liberalism would work. But the thing is, not everyone believes in liberalism, and liberalism is such a weak force that it can't prevent
every single ideology. Communism only works if everyone's a communist. If you stick me in a communist system, I'm not going to work for it.
Oh, well, you know that, but I mean, don't take this as an endorsement of communism. They would prevent people that are opposed to communism from subverting the system.
They would infringe on your rights. They would kill you if necessary. Yeah.
But liberalism would allow communists to.
No, we won't, because communism requires infringement of property rights.
Well,
okay, but no, liberalism would allow communists to spread their ideology
Damn right we would, yeah, and then we would fight it every single step of the way.
But you got the Cold War was lost on the domestic front, though. So I mean, clearly, I guess I just can't put my faith in this when we already lived through it not working out. And I think
Okay,
I don't think it's necessarily liberalism's fault, because I don't think liberalism was ever really meant to do this job. But everything liberalism stood against beforehand was right-wing values that were necessary for the health of a nation, and then kind of left itself enervated and easy prey for progressivism and Marxism.
No,
Yeah.
I am in agreement with you about the importance of a nation. Because I've just been reading Stanley Baldwin's On England, and he talks about the English values. Even some of the Christian values. There's some of the ideas of kindness, of the ideas of loving thy neighbor. But that doesn't mean that you have to surrender to your neighbor. And I think that is important.
I have a question.
Liberalism, I
do
found surrenders to.
I do have a question, because that made me. I do have a question for
Liberalism is
Brendan.
about safety from the neighbor.
I do have a question for Brendan.
Sure thing.
Would you say Jeremy Corbyn represents English values in any way?
Let's see.
I would say he does.
Okay, what values would you say are his?
Well,
English
I mean,
values?
clearly you have an NHS, so you're not opposed to any sort of socialism. Let's be honest.
I'm against that anyway.
I know, but I'm talking about.
Yeah.
The
No,
broad
but fair,
space of English
it
values.
came into enforcement in 1948 as a post-war welfare.
Yeah,
Um,
but
was on
but
the-
I
it
would
was
also add that Tony
Yeah.
Benn, he's a big fan of Tony Benn. Tony Benn definitely came from an English tradition where they saw this as the sort of they saw this as noblesse oblige in the British sense, to have these sorts of social networks for people. So I don't see Corbyn as un-English, and this is kind of just a bugaboo of mine. When English people talk about their values, they only talk about the values they like.
Well, okay. What I'll say is that I find Corbyn, he's anti-English, as in he's against the English people.
Yeah.
However, I'll say that what I'll say is that I think he's a very strong representation of kind of what I see the West has become, as in this self-loathing, weak, submissive,
Moral fag.
yeah, and just like giving in to all the.
No,
I think Blair is better for that, but I see your point.
I see what you mean though. But from reading On England, it's. I see the problem with Jeremy Corbyn's, kindness in the sense of his desire to bring in free tuitions, which he then, recanted, saying, actually, no, it wasn't economically possible. We just stuck it in there because we thought it'd be nice. With his free buses to anyone under 25, which I'm sure he will soon recant when he realizes it's not economically viable. But it's essentially best way I can put it, is a retardation of English kindness.
Yeah.
Being too kind for one's own good.
Yeah, exactly, and I'd say that's exactly what the West is right now. But I just want to ask though, like, how are you going to prevent Jeremy, unless there was an British nationalism, like that actually, like British nationalism, ethnic nationalism? How do you push back against any of the disastrous policies that Jeremy Corbyn wants to institute?
I'd say the reason people are voting for him is simply due to a failure of education. So I'd say the best place is, education. And
but again,
let me continue. And the best way to start that is for parents to educate their children, not just rely on the education system itself. Which is a big problem, because I see so many parents nowadays, they do not care about their children's education. They don't spend time reading with their children. They don't help them with their homework. They just rely on schools to do everything. They don't ask what's going on in school. They don't ask, hey, Timmy, what did you learn? Oh, today I learned that white people cause all the problems. If people actually took, initiative and cared about their children's education, then perhaps we could solve some of these problems. But that's
here's the thing, though.
It's kind of our thing is we don't think that there's any sort of. We think that once things devolve, liberalism just becomes kind of untenable, and as you're seeing in the UK in your own example, because basic expectations of people have devolved to the point where they don't even know what's being taught to their kids. We have this communist coming into power, and I think that's ultimately what we see as sort of the problem, is sort of this desire to free people from responsibility, which let's be honest, is a part of liberalism, even if we don't.
No, it's not. It's all about
okay.
Here's
the thing, though.
People argue the responsibility is illegitimate, therefore they should be freed of it. But it's still
those aren't liberal people.
Well, this is kind of like
I will take responsibility for everything I do.
They call themselves. Well, first of all, they call themselves liberals, and they make emancipatory arguments from the liberal tradition to suggest this. and also people generally just don't want to take responsibility, so you can't just rely on them doing it anyway.
You are right. Like I said, liberalism is hard. It requires responsibility.
Here's the question.
That's sort of what we're arguing, is that it's too hard, and so it's kind of just fallen apart, and it's left a vacuum in its wake because it also deconstructed every other form of meaning that was traditional to society.
Okay, here's what the problem I have with that answer, though. This is what you would do in like in a theoretical situation. I want to ask, what can you do? As in, because you don't control these educational systems. So what I would suggest is you need to go to the British people and say, we are a people, we're being replaced in our own homelands. We need to stand together, and we need to form an interest group that's explicitly for our interests, and that we can push political change through that group. That's what you need to. That's what I think you can do, because you don't control this education system. They're going to teach this no matter what, and if you control the education system, fine. But the reality is we don't. So what can we do?
Well, no, I disagree. I don't think we should be playing their game of identity politics, because
but it works though. It works.
It's flawed in its premise. The idea
that
we are somehow responsible for the actions of others.
Well, you're going to be held responsible even if it's illiberal. That's kind of, I think what we're saying is these things will be even if it's illiberal. So we need to sort of acknowledge it.
Then I would say it's better to
I would say we do just need a solution at some point, and that is a solution, even if it's not our ideal one.
And this is kind of bringing me to the point, is that it seems like liberalism is more focused on upholding its principles way beyond practicality, because you're saying you won't do this because you're using identity politics, but that works. It actually could get something done, but you're not going to do it because you're just
no, but the point of principles is that you base your actions and ideas off of principles. If you're not going to uphold your principles, then why even have them?
Well, I would argue if you're
have principles that could never work.
I'm not going to murder someone.
Let me change that around. If your principles aren't being reciprocated, why uphold them when they just hold you back?
My personal valuation of these principles. I want to base my actions off of these principles, because these are the principles that I've come to through existential analysis of what it is to be a person.
If we were in his class, Alinsky would be screaming at you right now, and I'm just saying.
and that fine, you can have these principles, but I mean, I'm not going to say like, well, 30 years from now, my son's been taken off to the transgender re-education camp. I'm like, well, I know that happened, but at least I stayed clear to my principles. This is the problem. It's not principles.
Well, clearly, you haven't. If that's happened.
Well, no, I stayed clear to them by not fighting back against it.
No, you do fight back against that, because that's a violation of rights. I mean,
don't say not fighting back. It's more like fighting back in the socially approved way that doesn't really change.
Fighting back in an effective way, because I don't see just stand by these principles as at all effective.
Look, you asked before what.
Well, I disagree with that. I mean, I think the methods of liberalism have created much more social change. Whether good or bad, we can agree or disagree on that. But the point is that those methods are what's caused much more social change. The violent methods of, say, Black Lives Matter, no, they haven't. But it was the early civil rights movement that did a lot more.
That's right. And you asked before how does liberalism explain nationalism? Yeah, like I said, you need to adopt a national liberalist view. And you asked, so what are you basing it on? Well, I'm basing it on the liberal value of reason. If it's reasonable now to adopt nationalism, because I see that this is what will defend freedom, then that's what you should adopt. So it's based on reason.
Yeah, but by doing so, I'm going against liberalism. By doing so, I'm strongly violating Brendan's policy of being against identity politics.
Well, let me.
Okay, one at a time, guys. One at a time.
The belief that a nation needs an ethos is not identity politics.
Yeah, it is.
No,
I think
No,
it
it is absolutely identitarian. It's just the identity politics you're comfortable with. Because frankly, let's be honest, when you guys say collectivist, you mean racist, but you know racist has no cachet. But okay, I just want to say something. You talk about what's reasonable. Now, I think it's reasonable to say, well, we need a solution. And frankly, it needs to be something that kind of comes easily to people, that doesn't need a lot of explaining, that can be intellectualized, but still is ultimately based on some sort of gut emotion and is sort of non-rational in that way. So I suggest some sort of identitarian response as the reasonable solution, even if it's not strictly speaking what liberals would like or they'd be uncomfortable with it. Do we disagree with that?
So sorry, can you say that again?
Okay, yeah, that was kind of long, but we talked about the what we think as reasonable, and I think we talked about the appealing to reason, and I think what is most reasonable, the most reasonable solution, is not something that's particularly complicated or hard to do like liberalism, but something that comes easily to people because it's a natural instinct and it can be intellectualized, but it's a natural non-rational instinct, and I suggest an identitarian response to the problems we see. Because
yeah, sure, that's fine if you want to do that. Just don't try to use the coercive power of the state. I mean,
once you're
would
in
need to
power,
eventually, though, wouldn't you?
All policy is coercive. This is kind of the tactical and capping stuff, because it's like at some point you're always going to be coercing something out of someone in the political process.
Right, but the question.
I mean, obviously, this doesn't mean we're just going to take non-whites' properties or stuff like that. That would be obviously too far. We're talking about a matter of degrees.
But why is that too far?
Well, because it would cost like a civil war.
Okay. So your reason
is it really only on pragmatic matters that you would reject that?
I think the pragmatic reason is the only reason I really need to just say it's not a good idea, and I think it's the most effective, quite frankly, rather than trying to form a coherent view of morality on the spot in a debate. That's kind of why.
Yeah. The point we're trying to get at is practicality over principle. Like, I mean, I don't want to have something that will work in the abstract. I want something that will work in the real world.
Right, but when you say working, it means working towards a certain end. Like, you can't just say working in the abstract. We actually have to talk about what does it mean to work.
As in, well, okay, yeah, I'd say for me, working as in like getting the things I wanted out of life, that I'd said earlier.
Yeah, and I remember you saying faith, family, fatherland.
Yes.
The thing I disagree with you is that I don't think those are things the political order should be concerned with. There are definitely things society should be concerned with. There are definitely things individuals should be concerned with. There are definitely things different groups, collectives, if you will, should be concerned with. I just don't think there are things the political order ought to be concerned with.
I think my fundamental disagreement with that is that I think that man in nature needs more structure. I don't think he'll naturally find those things.
Right, but why does that structure have to be a political structure? I mean, you can have societal structures. In fact,
ultimately, the most lasting social structures tend to have a political front to them, in addition to just sort of culturally.
I'm not totally sure I agree with that. I think the social structures behind cultures have lasted longer than any political structure.
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
Culture.
The problem is we've lost that, though. It's been eaten away at for the last 100 years or so. And how do we regain the current system? I see as being opposed to us regaining that. Right,
but you're not going to regain it by kind of putting the rotted corpse of Western culture, in political power. Rather, you need to rebuild Western culture, on the cultural level.
Oh, I agree with that, definitely. I totally agree that it's a cultural movement first.
Yeah, and I think that's frankly where we agree. It's the
okay. I agree with that totally.
I think really our most robust disagreement is on identity politics.
Yeah. Well, anyway, guys, we've been going on for about 2 hours now. I'll let each of you guys kind of have a final word. What I'll ask is, what do you see as the solutions to the problems we have right now in the world, and we'll leave it at that. I'll go with you first, Benedict.
Sure. Well, I've enjoyed this discussion. Think we all learned a lot from each other. I think I think we generally agree on much. I think where our disagreement lies is what exactly is the distinction between the cultural and the political order. And while liberalists will say that the political order has the goal of guaranteeing the moral territory for the individual so that they can each pursue their own good, the alt-right seems to in a sense view the political order almost as the lever on which different political groups need to fight to try to bend the political order to the benefit of their own group. I don't think we've resolved this discussion, that debate in this discussion, but I think we definitely brought more of the issues to light.
Mhm.
Okay, Brandon, go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So just want to quickly add on to the part about the identity politics. So I definitely see a distinction between race compared to nationality. You stick a white man in a Christian nation, chances are he's going to be a Christian. Stick a black man in a Christian nation, chances are he's going to be a Christian. Same with Islam. Same with ideologies like communism or even identity politics itself. But with nationality, you can't stick a nationality anywhere. It's essentially set in stone. It's a consequence of geography.
Yeah,
of
we
its
agree
people.
on that.
Yeah, okay. In which case, yeah, that's what I meant by nationality being acceptable and identity politics. I'd say no, not that it's essentially that I'm against this because it's the immutable. But no, yeah, just like Benedict said, I've really enjoyed this discussion. I have learned a lot, regarding your opinions. But yeah, it's been fantastic. I don't really know what else to say. So yeah, thank you for having me on.
All right, no problem. Go ahead, Zarathustra.
Okay. I think you guys I think I've been saying it all along, are too pessimistic. I think that liberal society will just win. All we need to do is to keep these conversations going. Part of my optimism, I think, is okay. Maybe the place that I live in, where we live, there are so many problems here, and yet the Israeli democracy just defeats all of them, and I think that and I look at the democracy in the West, and I see the same thing. Liberal society eventually defeats its problem, it solves its problems. So I think it just you guys have this outlook on the future where you kind of think that people will not change in time, and I think that's I think people will change and become and the future will look different. So things that you are afraid of now will not work out the way you think. It will not come to pass what you're afraid of. So basically, just liberal society. Keep on talking. Keep on fighting. And yeah, I enjoyed that conversation as well. So thank you.
All right, go ahead, David.
Oh, okay. Okay, I have to think of something. Okay, I wrote down some stuff during this debate. It was just sort of note-taking. I'll just kind of read it off. In the U.S., we basically have liberalism on paper. In fact, literally the Constitution. But it doesn't come out in practice, despite us being the most individualistic nation. This is kind of the core of my critique. I think there's a huge gap between theory and what we actually see. It seems like every time liberalism doesn't work out, it's because of some variable that wasn't aligned properly, which makes it seem like a high maintenance ideology, which you guys did concede, so I won't belabor that. Israel, as Zarathustra said, took a lot of immigrants from lots of different places, but they all had a common identity, so it worked out more smoothly. And I think liberalism's ultimately just been way more effective at attacking things it saw as illiberal on the right than on the left, and I think that's produced a lopsided situation we are in. And yeah, I enjoyed the conversation quite a bit. Of course, it was a lot of fun. We kept it light without like just screaming at each other, so that's always great. And yeah, I was glad you guys came.
All right. So to close out, I'll say that in the modern world, I see I really just see in the West people that have they're totally demoralized. They've lost their sense of identity. They've lost their sense of purpose, and they're really at this point in risk of losing their homelands. And what I'll say is that I think we really need to look at what we value the most in our society and think about what we really want out of life. And it really, I think, question the systems that we have in place and ask, really, are those the ones that are really going to get that for us? And it was a great discussion we had, but I'm of the opinion that liberalism will not do that for us. Thank you for listening. Till next time, endeavor.